The Irish certainly put the cat among the European pigeons when they rejected the Lisbon Treaty, which could only progress if all member nations endorse it. Ireland, of course, the only country constitutionally obliged to hold a referendum on the treaty. But the signs are that the European juggernaut will seek another way of implementing the provisions of the treaty and not allow a few million Irish, as the German Interior Minister put it, to decide on behalf of 495 million Europeans. Joining us from Brussels, the BBC's Europe correspondent Chris Mason. Chris, the one word that seems to be avoided at all costs in Brussels this week is crisis.
I think it is a crisis. I think they recognise to an extent, even if they don't want to admit it, that there's two crises to be examined here. Firstly is the constitutional crisis, if you like, how the European Union, the club of 27, that until very recently was just a club of 15, can actually run itself with so many members and with the prospects of extra members signing up to the club, the likes of Croatia, in the coming years. That was the motivating factor behind the European Reform Treaty, or the Lisbon Treaty. Critics, of course, said that it was a grand project with the aim being further integration, and of course that was one of the factors that led to that no vote in Ireland last week. In terms of the crisis, yes, they are here and having to work out what on earth to do next. And the second issue, which they're well aware of and want to make a big thing of, European leaders, is the issue of the cost of food and the cost of fuel. They're well aware that voters across the continent regard that as the most pressing concern at the moment, and they don't want to portray themselves as being detached and aloof and obsessing about the workings of their club rather than addressing the concerns of voters back home.
One poll has shown that some 40% of the Irish no voters simply didn't understand the Lisbon Treaty. Peter Mandelson today, the UK Commissioner, talking about the need to sell it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter Mandelson on a trade trip to Moscow today, pretty strong in his vocabulary, in his damning verdict on the way that the Yes campaign in Ireland handled themselves. He said that in political communication, speed kills. In other words, if your opponents put out material which you believe to be false, you've got to immediately jump on it and counter it with your own argument. And he felt that the Yes campaign failed to address some of the central tenets of the No campaign in Ireland. For instance, the suggestion that abortion and the rate of corporation tax and Ireland's neutrality could be affected by a Yes vote. The government in Ireland had strongly made the case that that wasn't the case, but in Peter Mandelson's view, that case wasn't made early enough, and therefore those theories, if you like, were able to gain traction with voters in Ireland and led to many to decide to vote no.
In terms of the way forward, there's talk of Ireland being given a permanent commissioner, a guarantee of the sanctity of its abortion law, its neutrality and its sovereignty over tax. So there are sweeteners available, are there?
Yes, there are, and the tone appears to have changed quite markedly since last Friday and Saturday, when European leaders were first reacting to the news that Ireland had voted no. In those first few hours after the no vote, Germany's Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier effectively said, look, the Irish have said no, so we should leave them behind. There should be a two-speed Europe where those who want to press ahead, the likes of the French and the Germans, can be allowed to do so, and countries like Ireland and perhaps like the UK as well can effectively be in the second division. It's quite interesting how quickly that tone changed. The Irish Foreign Minister attended a meeting of fellow foreign ministers in Luxembourg on Monday, and out of that came a far more consensual tone, a tone that said Ireland is part of Europe, Ireland has voted no, and so this is a problem not just for Ireland but for Europe. And that's very much been the tone at the start of this summit. There was a meeting this morning between Jose Manuel Barroso, the President of the European Commission, and Brian Cowen, the Irish Taoiseach. And at the heart of that was a sense that the Irish have to be given time to decide what to do next, and they can't be bullied into anything. And as part of that, yes, there is discussion here, and anything is up for discussion really in terms of how to save this treaty, about potentially allowing the Irish some protocols, as they're known, effectively some opt-outs. So perhaps it could be written into the treaty that Ireland wouldn't be affected in terms of its abortion law, in terms of what's seen as its favourable corporation tax decision, and also in terms of its neutrality. The UK has negotiated similar opt-outs from the existing Lisbon Treaty, things to do with justice and home affairs, for instance, and so the argument is that perhaps the Irish could do the same. The flip side to that argument is that 19 countries now, the UK included after a vote in the House of Lords last night, have actually ratified the treaty as it stands. And if too many amendments are made for the benefit of the Irish, perhaps some of those 19 might say, hang on a minute, we wouldn't mind some of that as well.
The French Foreign Minister has come out to say, we are all Irish, but is there underneath that a sense of anger at Ireland?
Yes, I think there is. There's a genuine sense of frustration amongst the French. Yes, publicly they've changed their tone quite markedly in the last couple of days. As you say, Bernard Kouchner, the Foreign Minister, saying we are now all Irish. Behind the scenes, though, there will be frustration in the Élysée Palace in Paris because the French are about to take over the rotating presidency of the European Union at the beginning of next month. And Nicolas Sarkozy, the energetic, exuberant French president, had lots of grand plans for his time in the top job. A lot of that time is now going to be bogged down sorting out the European Union's rule book. It's something he regards as not being particularly politically sexy. No one regards it as politically sexy, but undoubtedly it is the pressing issue at the top of the European Union's in tray, and I guess the sense has been that the best way to handle that publicly is to speak with lots of warm words of diplomacy for the Irish and allow them to make a decision in their own time.
Chris Mason in Brussels, thank you very much indeed.